Yeah. Now, there are 2 speakers in the schedule, but unfortunately only one could make it. So please give a warm applause to Jaromil, who will talk about the future of money.
Today, telling us we're sorry, we didn't mean it, we won't do it again. Trust us. Well, I have some people in my constituency that actually robbed some of your banks. And they say the same thing. They're sorry, they didn't mean it, they won't do it again.
So, I'm not sure if I should claim the climax of this movie or admit that the audio track, one of them, was missing. Anyway, you just saved yourself from a spoiler. This was the inside job. And I think it's a documentary worth seeing if you are concerned about the topic of this speech. And the topic of this speech actually links, or I hope to link it enough, to a discourse that is flowing through this camp. In various other speeches, you have heard concerns about transition. It was definitely worth attending to the Transition Telecom, I think, or watch the video later. There is another speech coming up about the declaration of cyberspace. There are a lot of topics brought up, and they are about constituency. So what I'm trying to do in this talk is to actually see the future of money, or whatever can become this infrastructure, this communication infrastructure for society, considering the fact that we might be the community that establishes one of the first trans-territorial constituencies, because that's the positioning of the hacker community nowadays. So my analysis, our analysis, unfortunately Radium is not here, he's in Portugal right now, is working with a partner for our project STRO, and he apologizes for not being able to come here, and he sent a video of 15 minutes that I can show you at the end of this, or almost at the end of this talk, as much as you can be patient with it, as long as. And the approach that we follow in this analysis is a philosophical one, and we try to make it interesting for hackers. I'm trying my best to explain first a bit of a political and philosophical background, and then go into technology. It's a hard task. And as you can see, I'm really emotional. And it's not my first talk, but it's the first time I'm so nervous in giving a talk here, actually. It's incredible. So, thanks. So the method I'm adopting is called the biopolitical method. I'm picking it up from Michel Foucault. He's a researcher definitely worth reading. He made an analysis of governmentality through the years and of liberalism, of various situations. I will quote some of them. One of the clues of his analysis is that he actually tries to build the history that has not been written. So what he calls genealogy is a research that is very detailed into the unspoken oral materials that can reconstruct actually the history of often what are the losers or the marginalized. What he also researched in are institutions of discipline like mental institutes or jails. So he's concerned about margins, he's concerned about what actually fences off a society, and his technique is that of researching micropowers, the micropowers that act beyond the curtain of an institution, and he does that by changing perspectives. The approach is also interdisciplinary, necessarily, because we should be all looking at an interdisciplinary approach to this topic, not just technical, not just philosophical, merging the two, and in this I quote Latour, who wrote an interesting essay about symmetric anthropology. So the fact that we should start seeing any artifact, any object, any new discovery that we do as a hybrid. It will influence both the humanist, the society, and the technical field. So nothing is just into one or the other field. I'm here also under suggestion of Steph, my friend. He told me, like, you should restate again, as I did in a previous speech in Barcelona, that capitalism is dead. I think it's pretty easy to say it nowadays. I mean, I have a honor to say it now, and you can be joyful or not. Anyway, the point is that once capitalism is dead and we are running a dead horse, and it's pretty clear by the numbers, and we can just reiterate through failures and failures, one thing that we should do to understand what comes after is looking at why capitalism came in. So what is the history that brought capitalism in? So in pre-capitalist modes of production, so before capitalism came, the relation of labor, I have also a joke to make about this. I mean, we could explain also that capitalism is dead just by a simple slide like this. Please note the date. Yet, this is not the method that we follow. One, because it doesn't really opens up a discourse about the future. And second, because it is a very historicistic approach. It is a materialistic approach. It is something pretty obvious nowadays, but it doesn't really add much to the discourse that we want to build. So, coming back to what I just started illustrating, before capitalism came, we had a situation that Deleuze and Guattari, in their book Anti-Oedipus, define a coded situation for the positioning of the subject in culture and in society. It means that the subjectivity, what people recognize themselves in, cannot be separated from the social conditions of the subject in society, so that you are defined by your provenience, by your family, your class, in the worst case, your caste. So you're going to perpetuate, you have a relation of repetition with the context where you come from. So most of the time, you can imagine it, you will do the same job or you will be in the same social conditions of your parents. This was before capitalism came, and the main function of capitalism was that of breaking down the codes. And this was well accepted, and it was a very useful thing to, for instance, bring down situations like caste systems. It basically established a relationship that was completely quantitative between labor and capital. It permitted our society to follow dreams, the well-known American dream that everyone can be anything. You can become anyone. You have an open field, you have an open game, you can join it. The quantity of money that you have, the knowledge that you have of the world and the system in which you're playing is your horse, and basically you can arrive everywhere. That is the promise. It did so using money as a main media. And money is a media, and it has been claimed as a neutral media since the beginning, because it is basically the measure of this quantitative relation. It's positioning the man, the subject, as an indirect being. This is a quote from Georg Simmel from 1900, one of the most authoritative books on the philosophy of money. It puts man as an indirect being. Indirect because your wishes, your desires, your possibility to reach them are conditioned by the quantity of money that you have. So you have a mediated relationship with objects and also with other people. And this brought to the birth and growth of a financial system that basically operated a radical abstraction from any mode of production, any production process, to the point in which, in the moment in which you buy a stock, you have no relation whatsoever with the processes that are producing that mineral, that good, whatever that is. You don't need to have a relationship with it. This is where the system grows, and up to the point where we are. And I'm arguing that this is the death of capitalism, actually. The death of capitalism is the enslaving of the man to a machine that is there to execute a task that separates completely the mode of production, the process of production, from the person that is going to interact with the machine. It's a good metaphor, the mechanical Turk. It's a machine that plays chess, and inside is hidden a person. It even inspired a novel by Edgar Allan Poe. There are even ways to say in German that might be considered racist, but they are not. In fact, they are referring to this machine. The fact that you are just enslaved and doing a repetitive work. We can recognize these roles in many of the jobs that are offered to us nowadays. We function mostly as brains, human brains, in a system that needs to mine our recognition processes, our cognitive processes, in order to capitalize on them and then reuse it. And the people that will be using these cognitive processes accumulated will be absolutely not in relationship with those that have produced them. So it became immaterial, it became delocalized, and it runs on a system, on the money system, which is completely unbalanced. I'm talking about the heavy difference between money typologies in the world, of course. This brings us to a point that keeps war going. Because one thing that I try to do now with this discourse on biopolitics is to put life at the center, and life and body at the center. So the body of humans should be still considered the central point of all our effort to actually improve our living together. And the body is the point of explosion or implosion for our societies. Fundamentalism and all the power that fundamentalism brings is centered around bodies. The explosive body is also the implosive body of the person that gets internated into a mental institution and kills itself or tries to kill him or herself. And body is the issue also for those revolutionary types that declare sex as a revolutionary practice or porn. And the reappropriation of the body also in the liberation of economies. The last thing that you have to sell if you become a prostitute. And the last thing that you have to curate and let live forever if you dream, if you have that dream. So the system in which we are living arguably is a dead system because it's deleting bodies from the picture. So people have no more relationship with the bodies of the other people. This can bring to huge disasters. The analysis of Foucault on the revolution of Tehran against Le Shah, which was the king of Iran in 77, which was forced to escape from Tehran, is about that. Fundamentalism came up. The Ayatollah Khomeini was applauded as the new ruler, entered the city in 77 after his exile, and he established a religious fundamentalist regime, promising to the people that they would have had a way to handle their bodies. I mean, that's what religion buys. It tells you how to take care of your body, what to show and what not to show. It gives back to the body the actual importance that people need to have to actually build their own subjectivity as well. How to get out of here? It's getting better, the whole thing, from now on. There are many approaches, but basically a lot of approaches are polarized around being pro or against modernism. So you can take a complete negative stance against technology, saying, okay, technology is the evil that makes our body disappears and blah, blah, blah. Or you can just like go for technology and be very enthusiastic about it, saying, oh, technology is just accelerating our minds and making us all connected, and it's wonderful. I think the gray area, again, quoting Rob Honkripe from yesterday, is what is most interesting here, and it's the area of transition. And it's also an area in which we can develop a transversal approach to modernity, not refusing it, not embracing it completely, but try to build new forms of rationality on top of it and between. In order to do that, one of the first things that we have to take into account is the existence of the commons. We have to get out from the strained relationship between public and private. This war will never end and will actually lead nowhere. Just look at Italy right now. I mean, it has been like for 15, 20 years, just an endless war between the private power of a person that even became prime minister and the public power of the judges that want to persecute him. And it's just perpetuating this narrative to the point that people don't reach even to imagine something else if they think of a nation. This leads absolutely nowhere. There is something beyond public and private, and it's what both public and private are predating in order to exist, and it's called commons. This camp is a boiling pot of commons, and no one is allowed to actually predate them. There is no public or private sphere really that takes over, yet the communication is very organic. I'm talking about commons, I'm talking about water, mineral resources, and general sentiment, which is a buzzword also for the financial world, because general sentiment is usually data mined for forecasting purposes. So you can understand what is your next stock that is going up nowadays by data mining social networks. That's at least what they're trying to do. or how they can aim better advertisement to people. So actually, even the friendship, which is common, it's being predated in this way. What can we do to take it back? First of all, I'd argue we have also to get past from these two old categories, political categories, liberalism and socialism. Because basically liberalism has done the error that brought us to this point. Neoliberalism, of course, accelerated and exasperated it, which is decoding everything in economical terms, which is the total abstraction, the radical abstraction in which we are. On the other side, socialism is a completely irrational thing. It doesn't have a rationality that is able to govern. It doesn't represent really a pact that can be accepted rationally and a game that can be played without any differences. Often it establishes relationships of privilege in the best case and of predomination and prevarication in the worst. Even Foucault mentioned the fact that all texts about socialism that are existing are not exactly establishing a rationality. So far, socialism has been grafted into a rationality of government. That's what we call social democracy, for instance. A democracy that establishes a situation in which everyone is equal, and then you graft concepts or interventions that are socialist on top of it. How to do that? Well, I'd argue breaking a taboo today, since we are the internets and we are there for breaking taboos. Actually, money is a taboo, and that's the next taboo that we should break. How to do that? We can do that by engineering new forms of monetary systems, and this is an approach that we are taking with many of our projects, because I think we all feel that by engineering the way and designing the way wealth is circulated is the most rational and honest way to actually empower margins and redistribute wealth and have produced what we like. So I will get less theoretical now and pass it to an analysis of more pragmatic projects. The first is crowdsourcing, which is quite a buzz and has some limits. What I think is the biggest limit of crowdsourcing is that basically replicates a modality for power to exist again. Not just for the fact that that access to the biggest crowdsourcing websites is syndicated, but mostly because it doesn't create a circuit in between. There is just a flow, like a vote. There is one project and another project, and people will choose which project goes on. The project will give the results that promised, but it doesn't generate an area, a circuit, actually. Then we have systems like Flutter. I refer first to crowdsourcing and Flutter because they both have this positive approach of putting the community in the first row. Flutter is interesting because it tries to slide out of the old financial system, and especially it builds a circuit. So the entry point is still the old money system, but once you are inside, if you get fluttered or you can flutter back, then you actually are into a circuit. So it starts to drift away. And it has a bottom-up approach, and it's still global and local. It can be used in both senses, and it's common-centered. Now, it needs a lot of development, especially to be more local, to have access, to give local access to the system, but it's going in a nice, interesting direction. Now, my hope for this system and other systems is that they don't stop where they are, that they continue. There is one dangerous thing that happens, and happened also to Bitcoin, is that the developers become stakeholders of the system, so that they are very afraid to change the system because this will break and they have a stake into the system. Don't do that. Just dare more, because this is just the beginning. So we have an innovation also coming into the picture, which is the peer-to-peer crypto money approach, which brings a lot of new aspects. into the game of designing money. Here I try to resume 3 of those aspects that are the salient aspects, in my opinion. Well, it's digital cash, so it's, it can be pseudonymous. Well, let's say like the way to track money flows changes because the accounting system changes. Banking becomes optional, so it breaks this complete monopoly of banks since the birth of digital currency. Since the birth of digital systems for money, banks had a monopoly. You have to store your money into a bank, into a centralized certified body. What crypto cash does, it's very simple. You can store your digital money at home. Now, for some types, it might become very dangerous because you don't know how to keep your security. For some other, the majority in this room, I guess, is just like an option. We have encryption, we can have our own storage, we can duplicate it, we can backup it or not, or share keys with people. So this is a big shift, also because actually the creation of a bank becomes a different business. It becomes a more accessible business. And also because it actually puts the end to the monopoly of trust network. You don't actually need the same way the trust was handled before. It's not anymore. Beyond banking, also for your transactions, it happens what you have with cash again, which you don't have with current digital money systems. You don't need to trust the person you're doing the transaction. In the moment in which you need the cash flowing and you are sure that this cash is authentic, you don't need to trust more than that the person you're selling something. You just give it back, what the person bought. Right now, you have rating systems on online services for selling stuff because you need to establish a certain trust. And the third innovation, which is the most interesting, I think, that has still to emerge, and which will put institutions, current tax institutions, into quite a crisis if they don't actually update themselves, is the triple-signed receipts. Now, to make a back step in time, what we are using now for tax accounting and accounting system is a system called double accounting, double book accounting, which was invented in 1496 by this friar in Venice. And we are still using it. It's a simple system. You have a book of your expenses, your transactions, and then the tax has a book of your transactions, and these transactions get matched at the end of the year. And, well, whatever is the authority with whom you share the responsibility of these transactions, and that's how you find out frauds. Of course, in time, we also, people found out also how to link to the network of transactions. So it can be used in many ways, but basically it doesn't forces you to keep the track into one central authority, but you can actually be sure and clear out your transactions at the end of the year, let's say of the financial year, just in a network of triple-signed receipts. There are various systems that implement these things. One is through Ledger and Loom, which is basically, in my opinion, not so interesting because it doesn't really offers, I mean, it's a way to build a new financial market. with this kind of double-blinded certificates. And it basically provides hashes for the transaction, which is economical dial tones, QR codes, data objects. And it's server-based. Then there is Bitcoin, which is very interesting because it brought in particular properties. And one of the most interesting, what I consider the most interesting, is the authentication. So what Bitcoin did is bringing an energy pool, the possibility to have an energy pool for authentication. What does that mean in practice? For authenticating money nowadays, what you need is a big building with very thick walls, a secret procedure, which is an alchemical process, let's say, to actually print the money, and then armed guards on the perimeter to guard the production place. What you need with Bitcoin is just a fairly large group of people to use it, make transactions, and use their CPU power to actually authenticate, and the system becomes more robust, and the more it's used. So it's actually pooled to all the users. Now, if we argue that Bitcoin is just like consuming electricity, we are completely underestimating the old system in which we are, which is an incredible consumption of energy in actually maintaining the places where money is printed and the authentication process that takes to print it. What is a bit upsetting if Bitcoin keeps on this way, in my opinion, is the fact that the Genesis code is not configurable. Bitcoin has a big potential, yet is a deflationary system, and it doesn't exactly favor the fact that you can use the same system as Bitcoin to create new coins. Now, I would argue that who says that a deflationary system in economy is not really a long-standing one is right, because when you have such a system as Bitcoin that becomes more and more popular, then people that have Bitcoins start hoarding the money because the money is worth more, so they will not sell and they will not circulate anymore. It's deflationary, so it won't grow anymore, and people are not incentivized to spend. And the whole system, money, is a media system, so it should be circulating. That will be the death. You end up with an amount that you are keeping because you hope it will be worth more or less, but it's not much more than that. If we open up the Genesis code, instead we can have more deflationary systems, and people can be interested actually in investing in one or another, and it creates more a situation that is resilient. Let's start using that word. Namecoin, freecoin, multicoin are things you can find on GitHub, and more to come, and on Gitorius. Still, it's a very immature technology. I think it needs a big deal of development, but we know this. At last, I think Open Transactions is one of the most interesting pieces of code right now out there, because it has a lot of documentation, and behind the code is fairly portable, is big. Fellow traveler, the coder is very communicative, and especially because it's a generic system. So it's a wallet system that works also with Bitcoin, also with True Ledger, with Loom. And it needs development. It has a command line interface that needs a little bit of documentation, GNUification or whatever, and I think it's a good candidate actually if you're looking for some projects to get involved and build your own with it, because it's completely free and open source, and GNU GPL, I think. After this overview, I have the pleasure to show you at least what Radium, who is not here, sent us, which is his part of the story, and it's quite interesting because he's with his fingers in the dough.
And I'm here for introducing you to Dindy's approach in currency systems design. And I would like to start from what the very managers of the current system have to say about the bridging between analog and digital in currency systems development. So the governor of the Bank of England, Mervyn King, in his paper written in 1999, Challenges for Monetary Policy, New and Old, wondered whether it was possible that advances in technology would mean that the world may come to resemble a pure exchange economy. Indeed, electronic transactions in real time hold out that possibility. There's no reason in principle why final settlements could not be carried out by the private sector without the need for clearing through the central bank, and Bitcoin is one good example of this. There's no conceptual obstacle to the idea that two individuals engaged in a transaction could settle by a transfer of wealth from one electronic account to another in real time. The same system could match demands and supplies of financial assets, determine prices, and make settlements. Financial assets and real goods and services would in turn be priced in terms of a unit of account. Final settlement could be made without any recourse to the central bank. Without such a rolling settlement, central banks, in their present form, would no longer exist, nor would money. Because we are dealing with a very particular kind of money when we speak about conventional money, because this kind of money is created as banks make loans with positive interest charges. This kind of money is inflationary, is artificially kept scarce, there's no intrinsic value in the fiat money domain. Its management is vertical and follows a very strict hierarchy, and the property is of a semi-privately owned central banking system. So it's better performing by design, as everybody of us can see if we look at how the system is behaving in these very days. I mean, gold is skyrocketing more than $50 per day. We have the problem of the US downgrading in its rating, and we have the never-ending debt crisis in Europe, but we can say that the crisis is global actually. So what is the approach to currency system design? Well, our approach is towards sustainable development. Indeed, in the first graph, you can see that the current financial system is directed towards brittleness and eventual collapse. We need to go, when we pass to the second graph, by showing that we need to go towards the parameters of the window of viability by increasing diversity and interconnectivity in the system. So by adding what Bernard Litter calls complementary currencies, what we in DND call alternative and community complementary currencies, and more in general monetary reform toward diversity to increase the interconnectivity among the parts of the system and set the system toward a direction of regaining sustainability, overall sustainability and resilience. Our approach in doing this is to think about a global local multi-currency system. This kind of system would present different types of currencies. So when one currency fails, like national currencies, we have other means of payment to use and to implement for making the economy go and not crash, as the expectations for Europe and the US are currently very clear, orientated in that direction. How to do that? I will give you 3 examples of the use of this software program called Cyclos. It's free and open source. It offers a complete online banking system with additional modules such as e-commerce. So you can set up your bank and you can start trading among the participants to the clearing network. The platform permits decentralization of banking services. That was what Marvin King was saying. And the objective of the programmers was to create a professional software that was easy to use and maintain, secure, and highly customizable. We at D&D have some doubts because it's actually compiled in Java, and so cycles could be really rewritten and be made as a better and robust software for banking and e-commerce. But I'm working with this, and I will show you what you already can do with this kind of software. The first example is the C3 commercial credit circuit. We had a problem in 2008 in Uruguay. It was a global problem, but the system was implemented and designed for the Uruguayan economy, whereby small and medium-sized enterprises, which gave and give employment to almost 70% of the national workforce, started to experience a shortage of credit, and most of them were condemned to closure. The people of these medium-sized enterprises, the entrepreneur, were paid in 90 days, but they had to pay their suppliers within 30 days. So we have these 60 days old that with monetary engineering had been possible to fill. And so the system continued to run. How? You have in the process the use of insured invoice instead of money or other payment claims, and you use them as a liquid payment instrument within this business-to-business clearing network run through cycles. So you have the government asking producers for services. They use their secured and insured invoices to buy other products from their suppliers or services to other suppliers within the C3 network, so they spend insured invoices instead of money. But if you are a producer and you need to cash the invoice before they reach maturity, then you can go to the bank and cash them by paying a high banking fee, because the bank will incur interest cost by making you cash the invoice before the maturity period has passed. So you are incentivized in continuing to trade with your invoices inside the network and wait for these invoices to be mature. What are the advantages of this kind of banking engineering system? It's a win-win for all situation, because workers do not lose their job. Businesses do not close whilst possibly they enhance their turnover. Banks increase their portfolio by this insurance mechanism, and they have a low risk and cheap insurance instrument indeed. And also governmental agencies who accept the C3 currency increase their income in terms of tax revenue. What are another example that at Dindi we are working on, making the cultural credit circuit, which is the C3 version for the cultural sector. So if you have the problem that public funds are lacking, then you can simply trade with a payment medium different from the conventional one, and you use the same kind of scheme that I was proposing here. So instead of commercial credit, you do cultural credit. You have the same choices. You can go to the bank and cash the cultos by paying the banking fee to cover the interest costs. Otherwise, you can keep the cultos until maturity and cash them with no banking fees. Or otherwise, you can continue make them circulate in the cultural credit network. In so doing, you're going to increase the aggregate turnover inside that economic circle, economic network. The third example is a project onto which I'm working presently, where I'm based here in Portugal, and this is the motivation why I was not present personally in doing my presentation at CCC Communication Camp. I'm trying to use Cyclops for building up an instrument like the C3, but especially designed to work in a counter-cyclical way, so against the crisis. I call this project Our Bank, and what Our Bank is meant to do. We have the structural problem in Portugal and in the whole Euro area, but the Portuguese austeridad measures will be as follows. Portugal has accepted 78 billion euros from the IMF or the European Fund for Financial Stability or the European Central Bank. Somebody will put this money maybe together to save the country from default. And by doing this, it's already been measured that between 2011 and 2012, we will have a GDP contraction of about 4%. Consuming will fall of about 8.2%, and the purchasing power of the euro will lose 5.4% in these 2 years lag. What is the solution? Well, we started thinking that the property of money is not ours. Everybody knows that the European Central Bank is the legal owner. But we can decide how to use this money to our own advantage by implementing free open source software. So it's very cheap, very secure and transparent, and very helpful for contrasting the austerity measure. Because we can imply certain conditions for digital money in order to make it work better for the country, in this case Portugal, but the plan is to go European, so also in Spain, Greece, Ireland, now Italy is coming, maybe France, rumors are going on in these days. It's very hard to understand who will need this, but a lot of countries will need this. Even while nominally this money is still expressed in euro. So the solution is to increase the purchasing power of our euros with our bank system of payments, where it is operating a bonus-malus mechanism run with flows cycles. How? Well, within the virtual payment network of our bank, euros can be designed to behave differently and to circulate within one specific market and empower that economy, in this case the Portuguese national economy. So if you put 100 euros in a bank account at our bank, you will automatically gain a 5% bonus, and you can spend it into the network of businesses that are providing goods and services and are willing to participate into the network. If you want to spend out of the network by using the money that you put in our bank account, then you will be fined 6% on the value of your transaction, and this is an incentive for you to spend within the network. What would happen with this? It's like devaluing the currency as Portuguese were used to do with all the escudos, but you're using actually euros, and you're building up a virtual network with cycles, whereby you can start to trade with this bonus-malus mechanism, whose main effect will be to compensate this previous 5% loss in purchasing power I was speaking about. So in these 2 years, the Portuguese people will experience no loss in purchasing power because of the bonus-malus mechanism. So in conclusion, I would stress that possibilities with open source software and money system design are infinite. At Dindi, we're trying to work in the most urgent domains, which are those more affected by the financial crisis at different levels. So it can be a place like Uruguay, which is more or less a developing country, or it's not so important as advanced economies, but you can also act here where the crisis is hitting most, so in the south of Europe presently, with this kind of system that will help people actually to go against the austerity measures. And so in general, Dindi's approach in currency system design is stressing the importance of open source software, technologies like and algorithms like those developed by the Bitcoin crew. You will also see what Jeremy has to say in this particular domain. And we invite you to think about what your knowledge can contribute in solving this mayhem that the financial crisis is impelling on all of us. I hope to have been clear, and I thank you for your attention. I wish you a great, great, great time at the camp. Goodbye from Radio.
All his love is really sorry that he couldn't come. To conclude and open up to Q&A, is very important that you make the next step and you make the connection. Whoever is inspired, that is looking at this, we are putting on the table some thoughts and some actions, but there is a lot to be done. And already you see the distance between these first philosophical reflections with which we started this talk, and then the field work. And you can imagine what Marco, what Radium is doing is really being on the field there in Portugal and connecting and telling people that there is a possibility to actually, make your own money and exit the system. So if you're really critical, then you can build complementary or even alternative circuits. So it's a matter of what some philosophers nowadays call even exodus. So if you are critical of a system, why should you use still that media? You can change the media channels. We have a very good experience on that. In the moment in which you try to do it, the real tough challenge is that of binding it with these dynamics that we mentioned, with the production of the values, and with the dynamics that produce the values, with the bodies that produce the values, to let people feel people, and especially with the commons. There are some books somewhere quoted. One is Commonwealth, which is very interesting, came out last year. It's the last one of the trilogy of Negri and Art, which explores the notion of the commons. And another one I have here that was an entertaining read, especially for us from the digital world, which is André Gortz, L'Immateriale. But the one that I like the most about all these topics and that teach me most is this book that is almost not printed anymore, and it's almost, I really, it was hard to find a copy, by Christian Marazzi, who is also getting well known now. And this is one of his old books, and it's called Il posto dei calzini in Italian, which means the place of the socks. And the metaphor is this: in your life, the person that puts the socks in your drawer is the one that loves you the most, yet is the one that is less paid in this war game of the economy. Thank you.
Okay, you know the drill. If you have questions, please queue up at the microphone. Well, yeah, I can come to you, but I don't particularly like to.
So you mentioned earlier that socialism wasn't rational. I wonder if you could perhaps elaborate on that?
Yeah. Well, of course, it's an argument that can be debated and could be very interesting to debate it. Myself, I changed my idea many times, like why don't we implement the socialism that Foucault mentions has still to be implemented or not? I think the challenge is open and I might be wrong. But what doesn't seem rational is the fact that every time you have a planning for the social, you give the privilege to the planners. And this is the loss that socialism has to liberalism, because theoretically, in liberalism, there is no planner, there is a game. And everyone plays that game, but there is no privilege. So, the audio to the microphone to the center. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think you had a very interesting talk, and I found it especially. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
And I found it especially fascinating how you came to the sub-currencies, for example, for the Portuguese market.
Yeah.
But you try to connect them to your notions of the body and the commons, which you introduced in your philosophical part. And I have huge problems with these two notions. I have the feeling that you didn't define them properly, or at least not in this presentation. For once, you say that outside this area there are the commons, where I see a difference between public, the streets, private, the tents, public, the tents, private, the sleeping bag. I don't see the commons there. There might be some things which are less public and things than in the normal life, but still there is this difference. And even more so for the body, you say that we should make a system around the body, but the body is one of the most difficult concepts to define. If I make music, does this still count to the body, or is this music external to the body? Is the body my skin? Is the model? It's a very interesting thought, but if you cannot put it in clearer words, then you cannot convince me.
Well, it's a constraint to have a 60 minutes talk about these things, and it's a constraint to have a stage, which, as you see, I start just feeling like jumping off. And I still believe that there are commons here, and these commons are, for instance, even the will to show or to interact with the first person that asks you about your project, about your ideas. You're not selling them. You're not asking to sign up to any Creative Commons license before starting to talk. There is no one enforcing a copyright on the things that are shared here, or a copyleft or whatever. You're just sharing them. So this very organic, natural attitude of sharing ideas on the material level, I call commons here. Because it's something that stays in the community, let's say, that flows through. Or I know it's not a good definition. Regarding the body, in music, when he was telling me like what is the body, I was just thinking about the dancers. And of course also the fingers and the breath of the players, and it has I can't say more than that. Thank you for your criticism.
Just a note, the mic is movable, you don't need to crouch.
Yeah. In one of the first slides, there was a quote on the unimportance of scale, and that it was more the perspective that was important. But still, I was wondering about the scalability of these systems and how these different currency types, like the digital coins or the C3, how they interact or connect through different exchanges as a distributed economy. For instance, on the local or regional, national, global level. So I'm wondering what your idea about this type of scalability is.
Thank you for the question, Dreamer, because I forgot to mention one word in this speech, and it's rhizome. So if you think of the rhizome as defined in the book that I quoted at the beginning, actually no, that was Anti-Oedipus. In another book by Deleuze and Guattari, which is Mille Plateaux, 1,000 Plains, I think it's translated in English, they define this quite hyped image of a rhizome. So in the rhizome, there is not really a scaling, and you can see it almost as a fractal system. So there is no scale, because when we imagine a monetary system in this case, we imagine it as replicable and then interconnected. And the square that Radium was showing, the four squares interconnected, you can imagine they form a square which interconnects another 4 squares. It grows like a Sierpinski pattern. So the vision is that of not just taking care that a system can scale because we can apply the same system everywhere or the same value everywhere, but is that we can actually share the production means for circulating values in different contexts, and then allow them to share again. One thing that is also important to mention is that we want to get out from the national kind of delimitation, because it's absolutely obsoleted nowadays. I mean, the boundaries of our value and communities are very different, and they don't match just like a line traced by Napoleon and whoever came after.
Yeah, I can imagine some local community exchanging with a community on the other side of the world, or where with a higher level, like some other national exchange, or a translateral exchange between these different currency types and communities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And empower them to actually join the game in a way that they have a standing point, a media.
But then opposed to that, you have what you mentioned at the end, the Exodus type groups that want to step out of these systems completely, basically, and their exchange will be purely within goods, opposed to monetary systems.
Which you can still do, you should be able to do.
Yeah, exactly. But is that also what you meant with these Exodus? They want to have this Exodus from the monetary system and have exchange purely with goods and, well, services, apart from exchanging through a monetary system.
It's a very problematic word, Exodus, if discussed like this, because we don't have enough time. There is a lot behind this word, and it's a matter of constituency. When you constitute yourself, it means that you're not forced to interact with someone or to respond to someone, but you're just like constituting yourself as a community, and then you can also decide to leave. And the potency for this to happen is into the fact that you can produce the same conditions on a smaller scale or a larger scale, so to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you, very interesting. I would have a big amount of questions, of course, but I choose one, which is, did you explore which is the situation about the laws? Because, of course, creating alternative currencies, new monetary systems is a big challenge, and if we look also back in the history, in the 30s, for example, now we had another period of experimentations and invention of new currencies. At the end, they mostly have been repressed. Then also the monetary system changed. But anyway, what is the situation today, and how you think to address this problem?
Well, it makes sense to ask this question, definitely. And I take an easy escape route, the one of the philosopher. The digital process is an immanent process. And as such, it means that to influence reality, that reality likes it or not. That there is a law or not, the present systems have to deal with what the digital world brings to them. And this is clear in the copyright laws as they have been thought for the analog world so far and the digital world as coming. This immanent process is a problematic one, of course, but it's unstoppable. So I think that the process in which we are, to which we are looking, the process of money and the progress of money into the digital world, thanks also to discoveries, to cryptography, for instance, and artifacts of the digital world, it is an immanent process. So I think that when I speak here, I'm not really interested in caring about the laws that might stop or not, because those who write code write also the laws somehow. And there is a negotiation there, but definitely if we are up to imagine a system, the first thing that we should look at are the philosophical principles and all the background of political science and all the history of governmentality that has been written so far, rather than to the laws that allow us to do something or not in this very moment. Because what we are talking about is going to change the laws, definitely. They have to adapt to what is going to happen. And they cannot claim that they have a system that is under control, because the system, the current economical system, the current financial system is not under control, is not under control of the laws either. So it actually survives out of the existence of crime. It survives out of the criminalization of drug traffic by making it existing, or prostitution, or all the gray zones. It survives out of the existing of tax havens, like Isle of Man or whatever, you name it. So there is no real argument right now that would include laws in an interesting way for me right now. So.
Okay, we have a question from Sven in Berlin from the ISC channel about the technical feasibility of digital currencies. And the question is, or the assumption is, that we are missing the hardware to hold and exchange the digital values we have, and that the acceptance of this new currency only works with computers and internet to exchange. And the system right now isn't really resilient. Do you have any thoughts about this?
Yes, lots of good questions. I've been warned. This is the challenge. When Radium gives you the example of what he's working on now, he's facing it and he's there. That's why he cannot be here day by day and talking to people and try to realize how to make it accessible. And all these things also go down without the electricity, we know. I mean, we are busy with resiliency, and I think the resilient conspiracy should be really like a motto out of this camp. So, but anyway, how to actually continue existing out of the digital, that is an interesting field. I think one of the most interesting innovations right now are QR codes. So something that you can print and rescan, it can stay without need for energy, and it can be circulated. All the potential given to digital money by QR code has not been yet used, has not been yet. So that is just an example. Anything that represents a gateway, between a reliable gateway, between the digital and the analog, because we have to see it like this, that's the QR code, is a gateway. It's a very agile gateway in a way. Everything that emerges in technology as such a gateway, then it will be the key answer to this. At last, an example, a person that has never been used to click on a computer or talking about these things, if this person just knows that your bank account can be erogating, can be giving you money out of your printer at home, and that you print this money to go shopping, and that you cover the QR code until you are shopping, because in the moment in which you show it, you are giving the money, this person, even if he has never used a computer just for printing, will be able to use this system, I think. It can be explained. Hide this thing, it's a bit of a magic, or people that are told that on their phone they have this banking system, they can generate money. Simple app. I want to give like 10 dindies to someone. I make it appear, I leave the phone here, you put the phone on top. Even if it's inefficient, it's a QR code scanning, there is this magic moment of recognition, and plop, the money is given. It even looks cool, you know, you can even use it in kind of underground transactions.
Okay, we have a very patient question over there.
Please.
First I wanted to address why the current understanding of socialism and capitalism, I think, is bullshit. And I think it's simply because there are wars fought for it, and you can't fight wars or legitimate violence by an valid society concept. So the other thing was a concept that I didn't so much work on, but I find very interesting. Is directly energy-based currency, so not like Bitcoin. It's basically spent and it cannot really be brought back, but instead you really exchange energy in what form ever. Would be a really interesting thing, also because well, you can't print energy. Energy is preserved. It's perfect, non-inflationary. But also you can measure things in energy and see how that correlates to the price. And I think that would be very interesting to see what's energy is actually going in there and what the price is. So, and the last thing, maybe some of you may heard of OpenFlatter, and actually I'm the person who started it, but I'm not a developer or programmer in any way. I'm just a graphics person who thinks that should be started. And so if you are interested in such things, please let me know.
Thank you. I was also emotional when I started this speech, so I understand. OpenFlatter, you said. So your point is also to make open source the code behind Flutter, which is a very
make hopefully distributed way of the Flutter principle.
Well, you beat me on that, because that's the approach and that's the spirit. As Rob said yesterday, we should be really worried of how technology is being developed today, because everything is getting centralized and centralized. As much as I trust the folks at Flutter, as much you are right in saying that it should be decentralized. You know, good old systems like the SMTP, they became popularly used just because they are decentralized. Also the new systems that we use, especially for these important things, they should be open and decentralized. I will answer your questions backwards. The second one was about how do we measure the energy that is, if I understood well, the energy that is transforming. I mean, how do we measure the transformation of energy between the commons? Maybe money is not the right way to do it, but then I like to keep it a very open, an open perspective. That one. I'm not sure how can we measure between different typologies of commons. Maybe it's bad to put them in relation. And the first point, which we can use to also conclude, is actually a very important one, which I didn't mention much, but is war. And war is one of the main reasons why myself, I want to just get out of the present system. Is unbearable, and we cannot be part of a system that proposes war as the only alternative, only thing to be supported anyway, because that's how finance survives. I like one of the last sentences of, I think is André Gortz, that, no, it's Christian Marazzi, that it's strange to be said, but it's just the systemic capacity, the systemic ability to avoid a financial crisis of planetary dimensions that lets us explain the presence of war. And to produce capital using life, we must remember how much life how little life counts for the power in charge right now. So I think as much as to go from scale to scale, as much as racism, the origin of racism is basically the hate that people have for their own condition, that they project on the diversity that they have in front, as much as our system is actually exacerbating its own condition by perpetuating a constant war to the outside.
Yeah, so thank you.
Okay, I'm going to cut you off here, even though no talk is coming in this shelter anymore. But I have a short question.
I think I have a last comment on the digital currency stuff.
Yep.
Sven thinks that it would be fun to store digital money on changing the atoms on coins to hold the information. Then we can use the old atom money for the new digital money. And it would be fun if you find a coin to decide, is it a real money or is it digital money?
That's cool.
Okay,
that's a very transversal approach, actually.
I do have an announcement to make, and everybody who left early, their loss. At 1 o'clock in the morning, that is in about 1 hour and 13 minutes, there will be a surprise movie showing in Kourou, that's the other shelter, after the last talk over there. So I think you might want to watch that. I don't even know myself what it will be. Also, the feedback system is now enabled, so if you watch this talk or any other talk, please go to the schedule, which is linked from the camp website. There you can look at the pages of the individual events and give feedback. There will be a highly visible blue box that you can click and give feedback. That's very helpful to the organizers and also for the speaker who will be able to see the anonymized feedback for his talk. And lastly, when you leave, please look under your chairs and take all your thrash with you. Extra karma if you take somebody else's thrash. So please give a last applause for our speaker and good evening.